Look, everybody who has kids knows that you have hopes and dreams for your kids. And it mightn't be that you want them to be President of Ireland, you might want them to be happy. And you might want them to be healthy. And you might want them to find love in their lives. And drug use takes away some of those dreams. And being sent to prison takes away some of those dreams. And dreams that die on your family they hurt an awful lot, you know.
It was kind of like, the Dummy's Guide to Criminality. I went in really sick, I got sicker in there and I came out worse.
You'll never hear the guard saying, I've arrested somebody with personal use of drugs, I've given them a charge sheet and now they're clean. That has never worked.
If you think that giving someone a charge and bringing them into court is going to interrupt their drug use, I can definitely tell you it does the opposite.
The whole apparatus of the criminal justice system is significantly involved in the processing of what enough times and enough instances can be a relatively minor or simple offence.
The more we talk about drugs, the better now. My father, for instance, can't even say the word drugs.
Jack Nolan is my name. I'm a retired Assistant Commissioner for An Garda Síochána, been involved in policing for 40 years of my service. I am interested in alternative approaches to drug misuse in this country. 42 years of drug legislation in Ireland has not reduced the problem. Probably an unintended consequence has been the drug user at the end of the scale has often been the person who has been criminalised, stigmatised and suffered incredibly, who needs a way out of a cycle of desperation and who needs opportunities. For dealers and drug suppliers, I have no difficulty pursuing them, following them, using our CAB legislation. An Garda Síochána has had excellent results tackling drug gangs. Decriminalisation is just one element of a very wide, a very large and a complex issue. Those who have significant drug problems are those who get the least amount of help and who suffer the most.
When John was 14, he took his first hit of heroin. John wouldn't have been really into sport, didn't really have distractions to take him away from the problems that Ballymun had. And he fell into that trap like a lot of other people did in his generation. And that led then into this downward spiral of addiction and pain and suffering. Me growing up and seeing John struggle with addiction, the way I reacted was, reflecting back now was wrong. Tough love and being embarrassed and ashamed, and it's just the education. I wasn't given an education, and the policy created shame and stigma. So if I had a brother now who was struggling with drugs, I wouldn't push him away. I'd pull him as close as possible for when he's ready to come off drugs. People that are struggling with addiction, they need another way back in. They need to be given a more functional way to deal with their addiction. And I suppose John never had that.
I've been working with homeless people for the last 40 years. I have dealt with probably several thousand drug users over that period of time. Very often in my experience, and we're working with a particular subgroup of drug users, mainly homeless people, but in my experience there's a reason for using drugs. That often homeless people use drugs to escape. Many of the people we deal with have had horrific childhoods full of violence, full of abuse, full of neglect, and they're using drugs to run away from those memories. And so just penalising them for using drugs is a waste of time. Drugs are only a symptom of much deeper problems amongst the homeless population we deal with. and we have to deal with those deeper problems.
So I can definitely understand how some people in our society would be frightened by the idea of decriminalising drugs for personal use. All of the evidence is there that the system we have of criminalising people is causing harm. I think it's really irresponsible of the state at this point to continue forward with a system that has not worked. I've worked as a drug worker for 12 years now, and I can absolutely say that if we did decriminalise people who use drugs, it would have a huge positive impact on people who use drugs, but also their families, their communities, their societies.
Our kids are no different from anyone else's kids. To criminalise them for something that's either just an experiment as a young person or dealing with pain that they have in their lives, to criminalise them for that, it doesn't make sense to us, because you'll find that people who are taking drugs and who like taking drugs are usually dealing with pain of some description. It's not that they're criminals, it's that they're in pain, and we as families know that, and so it's a deep hurt when they're punished rather than helped.
When I was growing up in Ballymun, there was very little awareness about drugs and the dangers of drugs. Obviously I knew there was dangers involved because I used to see the drug addicts, you know, they'd be hanging around the shopping centre, and in my mind I kind of thought that they were just uneducated, or, you know, you'd look down your nose at them. Like, I was very young when I started taking drugs. I was only 11, and it was a huge shock to my family when they found out. You'd go and you'd meet people who were selling hash and they'd be selling speed. By the time I was 13, I was smoking heroin, and by the time I was 15, I was injecting. There was times where I'd have, you know, moments of clarity where I thought, oh my God, like you're actually injecting. It's like you're not in the driving seat. It's like your hands are tied behind your back and you're doing things completely against your own will. My behaviour, my personality shifted very quickly, and I started to steal from my family. And when they realised that I was doing that, I ended up having to, you know, go shoplifting. Like, I got caught by the guards, and I ended up getting put into the old women's Mountjoy prison when I was 15. You know, when you think of the purpose of prison, you know, it's like it's meant to, you know, you're punishing a person and you're taking away their liberties, you know, and you're telling them that your behaviour is not appropriate. So for me, it wasn't a deterrent, because I went into prison and I was 15 and there was women in there that were treble my age. I was put into a recreation room with like 6 other women. I was exposed to dirty drug paraphernalia. I was exposed to people using drugs openly, and it was kind of like, you know, the dummy's guide to criminality. I went in really sick. I got sicker in there and I came out worse. It had a devastating effect on me. As far as I was concerned, the worst thing that could possibly happen to me had happened, and I still had to deal with my own addiction.
So the stats tell us that 1 in 3 people in Ireland at some point in their lives have tried illegal drugs. Can you imagine if the time that they tried, that they were unlucky enough to be caught by the drug squad? I would have been from the better side of the block in town, so I had a really good upbringing, a good education, did my Leaving Cert, headed off to London, drink acid, ecstasy, cocaine. Now, I had been actively searching for heroin for 2 years, going up to Dublin, just buying a few bags, enough for a Saturday night, a Sunday morning, and that was it. 3 or 4 weeks becomes every fortnight, then it becomes every weekend. Then you're going up at the weekend and you're making sure that you have enough for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday, and then it's Thursday, and before you know it, you're using every day of the week. And then you try and stop, and I couldn't stop. When you're on drugs and you know you're addicted, your self-esteem goes right down. You lose confidence in your decision-making process. The stigma associated with people that use drugs. My father, for instance, can't even say the word drugs. a criminal conviction. You know, I have a friend that's only recently come out of jail now, and when he showed me the list of qualifications, he's done a few prison sentences, all for stupid personal drug use issues. He didn't waste his time in there. He got as educated as he possibly could and everything. He said, I have to declare all this if I go for an interview. You know, it's a waste of time. He's just stuck in a cycle he can't get out of, you know. He said, I'm clean again, I'm off all the drugs, and I just can't get nobody to give me a job or even give me a chance. You are a second-class citizen. You just get used to it, you know. You get used to it.
I was chatting about this before, about the taxi driver saying to me about Phil Linnett, you know, not getting his own statue. And I said, why? He said he was a druggie. So I don't agree with that. It was an interesting kind of insight into the mind of this other Irish citizen. It was like essentially this man's entire life and back catalogue of brilliant work, one of our greatest artists, he felt was null and void, should be discounted because he used drugs. And that goes to the heart, I think, about how we view addicts. It's not just about substance, it's not just a medical issue, it's actually a moral issue for some people. And we need to remove that.
I think it's really sad that if I had grown up in a country where, like Portugal, we were dealing with it as a healthcare issue, I probably, you know, would have went down a completely different route. My life wouldn't have I wouldn't have ended up in the states that I ended up in, and I'm like blessed to be alive, you know. And maybe some of the women who like are still out there using drugs or who have died will be like here today.
I think for a society like Ireland, very proud of Ireland, very proud of this country, very proud of our police force, I think we need to be open to people getting other opportunities.
We have the responsibility to make sure that we create a better society for people who either use recreationally and then move on with their lives and want to get jobs and travel and not be held back. And also people who have more chronic addictions, which we will unfortunately always have in society.
We will laugh at the way people lived 50 years ago, and people will laugh at us the way we've lived in 50 years' time.
Criminalising people for possession does not reduce or discourage drug use.
How we currently treat drug users does not work and needs to change.
Decriminalisation is a compassionate and pragmatic response to drug use.
We need to treat drug use as a health issue and not a criminal issue.
We need to support and not shame.
People who are found in possession of drugs should always be given the opportunity to make safer and healthier choices.
These people are your mother,
your father,
your sister,
your brother,
your best mate,
your cousin,
your colleague,
your child.